A multimeter is a really, really important instrument to know how to use. So I have here a few different multimeters. So I'll basically run through and show you some of the most important functionality. So one of the main things that you might want to do with a multimeter is measure voltage. So in order to measure voltage, you need to put the multimeter onto the mode that corresponds to V for volts. On this one, you can see there's also MV, which would be for millivolts. So you should know sort of in advance, or maybe by trial and error, you measure V first, and then if the value is very small, then you change over to millivolts to get more precision. The second thing that you have to recognize, very important to know, is that there are multiple plugs into which you can connect these leads. So most multimeters will have a single plug which is black and will be labeled as COM, which stands for common. So I put the black lead into the common pin, and then the red lead, I select a different pin depending upon the measurement that I would like to do. So on this multimeter, if I would like to measure voltage or resistance or a diode, or HFE means the gain of a BJT transistor, basically any of these functions, then I use this socket. If I would like to measure amps, then I use this one. If I would like to measure microamps or milliamps, then I use this pin over here. Another thing to understand is that the current measuring circuits will have a fuse on them. So you can see here it's labeled that this thing can measure a maximum of 10 amps. So if you try to pass more than 10 amps through this measurement circuit, you'll blow the fuse. And the milliamp and microamp range has a 600 milliamp fuse, and if you try to exceed that, then again you will blow the fuse, and you have to kind of pull the back off and replace that fuse before you can use that mode again. So suppose I want to measure voltage. Again, I need to understand whether I want to measure DC voltage or AC voltage. So on this multimeter, I select between them by using this function key. So in this subject, we will always be dealing with DC, with direct current. But in other classes, you might want to measure AC voltage, and so that's how you would select that option. Some multimeters, such as this one here, actually have different settings depending on whether you want to measure AC or DC. So you actually choose the appropriate thing using the selector there. So if I have a circuit that I would like to measure, so I've got this example here. This is a little lamp, and I want to measure the voltage across that lamp. So I turn my multimeter to the voltage mode, I check that it says DC, I check that my red lead is plugged into the correct socket here, and then I go and place my pins of my measurement lead at the appropriate location in my circuit. And so I can see right now that there's just above 5.5 volts across this particular lamp. Now I get a positive value because I've put the black lead on the low voltage end of the circuit. If I actually swap those around, then I will read a negative value. So you see there's negative 5.5 just because I have placed the low voltage side on the red lead. So this is always measuring the voltage of the red lead with respect to the black lead. So it's the voltage of the red lead minus the voltage of the black lead is actually the potential difference that is being measured. Now suppose I would like to measure the current that's actually flowing in this circuit. So I would need to go across and select current. I know from my bench supply that I expect something in the range of milliamps, so I will choose the milliamp mode here. And I also recognize that I need to change over to the milliamp setting that you see over here. Now, if I was to take this, and don't do this, right? If I take this and just try and connect it straight here on the circuit, then what's going to happen is all of the current is going to flow through my meter instead of flowing through the lamp. And I'm probably going to blow that fuse because my bench supply probably has a current limit which is higher than 600 milliamps. So if I would like to measure this current, then what I actually have to do is kind of get in to the circuit. I have to get in series with that circuit. And so one way that I can do that is take away that wire that I previously had just connecting from one end of this component over to my supply rail. And so now I kind of put two wires there, and then I get my instrument and I hold my fingers on there, and you see the circuit lights up because now the current can flow through the meter, and also I get a measurement which is 52 milliamps. So I just read that off the screen. Again, there'll usually be a DC versus AC mode, and again you select it by pressing function on this particular meter here. Another thing that's really useful to be able to do is to measure resistance. So you might have a resistor and you don't really want to try and read off those little color codes. So what you can do is hold I just need to change back over to resistance measuring. Don't forget to do that. Hold the leads onto there, and I can actually measure that this one is 10 ohms. So this is a 10 ohm resistor. It's actually 10.1 as measured here, because this will be a part with a 5% tolerance. So there's a 5% error in specifying that it is a 10 ohm resistor. The final bit of functionality that's really important is a continuity test. So I get to a continuity test by pressing function twice until I see this little speaker icon here on the screen. So this little speaker icon is the indication that I'm in this continuity testing mode. And the way that that works is when my leads touch, you get a beep. And so you can use that for checking, for instance, your solder joints, or checking the way that you've wired something. Do you have a connection? And you just sort of touch onto the circuit and you hear the beep, and it means yes, you have a connection. Some multimeters will have the continuity test on a separate mode. So for example here on this fluke meter, the continuity test is this again little kind of speaker icon, and when I touch you can hear the beep coming through there. Final thing to know is when you're finished, turn them off in order to save the battery.